Good evening, and welcome to tonight's journey, a voyage that will take us very far, not only across space, but through time itself, back to around 68 million years ago, when Earth was still the kingdom of gigantic creatures. Before we begin, tell me this: where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now? Tonight, we will step together into the final world of the dinosaurs, where ancient rivers flowed across humid plains, where forests trembled in the hot wind, where enormous footprints sank deep into soft mud before being buried by time for tens of millions of years. There, among the sounds of insects, flowing water, and the heavy breath of a world that had never known human beings, a shadow begins to appear. Not hurried, not needing to roar. Each slow step alone is enough to make other creatures stop. That is Tyrannosaurus Rex. But tonight, we will not look at T-Rex merely as a monster from the movies. We will see it as a creature that truly once lived. One that knew hunger, hunted for food, suffered wounds, grew ruled, and in the end vanished, along with an entire world. Before Tyrannosaurus Rex stepped out from the shadow of the forest, before its name became a symbol of power, dominance, and human wonder, there was already a vast, humid living world breathing beneath the sky of the late Cretaceous. Imagine that you are standing in western North America around 68 million years ago. This place does not resemble the dry, barren lands we often see in dinosaur films. It is not only dust rock and empty valleys. The world of T-Rex may have looked like a broad, warm river plain, rich with trees, muddy banks, winding channels of water, and life, crowded into every layer of damp soil and every low canopy of leaves. Smithsonian documents describe the regions that are now Montana and Wyoming when T-Rex was alive, as possibly having resembled a Louisiana-style floodplain more than the dry, grassy landscape of today. Morning in that place begins very slowly. A thin layer of mist rests close to the water's surface. The ancient river does not flow in a straight line, but bends across the plain, leaving behind old curves, still pools, soft sandbars, and mud flats, deep enough to preserve the footprints of creatures passing through. Along the riverbank, vegetation grows thick, though not exactly like modern forests. There are conifers, ferns, shrubs, and especially flowering plants, which are gradually becoming more important in the ecosystems of the late Cretaceous. Flowering plants had already appeared and flourished during the Cretaceous, becoming an increasingly prominent part of life on land. In the early light of day, that world is not silent. It is only silent in a way that feels very strange to us. There are no cars, no human voices, no ringing phones, no city waking up. But beneath that stillness are countless small sounds. Insects rubbing against leaves, water gently tapping against roots, mud sucking beneath the heavy foot of a large animal, ancient birds crossing the low sky, small creatures darting quickly through mats of rotting plants. This is a world that does not belong to human beings. No human eyes ever saw it while it was alive. Everything we know today comes only from stone bone, fossilized pollen footprints, sediment layers, and the patience of science. In the distance, a herd of herbivorous dinosaurs is moving across the lowland. They are not in a hurry. They feed, pause, and listen. Perhaps they are hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs that were once very common in the late Cretaceous. They use their complex teeth to process large amounts of vegetation like giant grazing machines of an ancient world. Farther away on a higher and drier patch of land, several heavy silhouettes of Triceratops appear among the shrubs. Their horns do not need to move much to make the entire scene feel solemn, as though this place holds both the peace of a feeding ground and the alertness of a battlefield that has not yet begun. But chapter 1 of our story is not yet the story of confrontation. It is the story of place. Because before we can understand T-Rex, we must understand the kingdom through which it walked. A predator does not exist in an empty space. It belongs to soil water, climate trees, prey carcasses, flood seasons, dry seasons, disease competition, and luck. T-Rex is not merely a gigantic shadow standing alone in the mist. It is the result of an entire world in motion. That world is the final part of a very long age. The Cretaceous lasted for tens of millions of years, so long that compared with a human life, it is almost impossible to imagine. But T-Rex did not live throughout that entire period. It appeared only near the very end, around 68 to 66 million years ago, when many dinosaur groups already had a long history behind them, and the North American continent had changed shape many times. The Natural History Museum emphasizes that species such as T-Rex and Triceratops lived only at the end of the Cretaceous, around 68 to 66 million years ago, and did not represent the entire length of that vast period. Seen from above, this land was not a continent like the modern map. Sea levels during the Cretaceous were once higher than today, and a vast inland sea repeatedly pushed into the center of North America, dividing and shaping lands, coastlines, plains, swamps, and river systems. The United States National Park Service describes the Cretaceous Interior Seaway as a sea that flooded into the interior of North America during the Cretaceous, creating coastlines, swamps, lagoons, and coastal plains that changed over time. So, when we imagine where T-Rex lived, we should not think of a simple stage. We should think of a landscape moving slowly through thousands and millions of years. Rivers changed course, mud settled, forests grew and were later swept away by floods. A sandbar today could become a riverbed tomorrow. A low basin could become a stagnant pond where fish turtles, ancient crocodilians, and small creatures gathered together. Trees fell into the water, were buried by mud, and disappeared beneath layers of sediment. Time here did not move by the clock. It flowed through rainy seasons, dry seasons, layers of soil, layers of rotting leaves, and the bodies of creatures left behind along the water's edge. Close to the ground, this world is full of small movements. The mammals of that time were not the rulers. Most of them were small, quick, secretive, living in the shadow of the dinosaurs. They might hide beneath roots run through the night, search for seeds, insects, or other tiny sources of food. In the sky, ancient birds were already present, and in some regions, pterosaurs still flew across open patches of light. In the water were fish turtles, amphibians, and ancient crocodilians. On land were lizards, insects, eggs, nests, dead plants, and warm mud. Each creature occupied a small position within that complicated web. The Natural History Museum notes that during the Cretaceous, birds were already present in the sky. Small mammals lived beneath the feet of dinosaurs, while terrestrial ecosystems were still largely dominated by dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs here were not only giants, there were young individuals, smaller species, wounded animals, old animals, herds searching for safer feeding grounds, and individuals that had wandered away from their groups. In a world with so many trees and so many rivers, you would not always see everything. Life appeared in fragments, a tail disappearing behind a bush, a head rising above the leaves. A patch of water turning cloudy because something had just waded through. A small herd stopping its feeding all at once because it sensed that something in the wind had changed. That is what makes the final world of the Cretaceous so captivating. It does not need to be loud in order to be frightening. It does not need constant battles in order to be fascinating. Just standing there in a land where no human foot had ever stepped would be enough to slow the mind. You could hear the water. You could smell the warm mud and rotting wood. You could feel the heat in the air, the weight of the humidity, the light filtering through low branches. And somewhere beyond the edge of sight, a large creature is moving. Perhaps it has not appeared yet. Perhaps you only see the reactions of other species. A small mammal slips into a hollow among the roots. A herd of herbivorous dinosaurs stops chewing. An ancient bird bursts up from the reeds. The surface of a shallow pool trembles softly. There is no music, no warning voice. Only the feeling that this land has an order of its own, and within that order, there are creatures that every other species must notice. T-Rex belongs to that order. Noon arrives slowly and grows hotter. The mist lifts from the water. The insects become louder. The herd of herbivorous dinosaurs moves deeper into the low vegetation, leaving behind broken stems, half-chewed leaves, and churned-up mud. Near the riverbank, a turtle crawls onto a rotting log to bask. Under the water, a long shadow glides past and vanishes. No one in that world sees itself as ancient. To them, this is the only present. The sun is high overhead. Food must be found. Danger must be avoided. The body must continue living for one more day. Evening falls and the light softens. The shallow waters turn the color of bronze. The mud holds the heat. The smell of rotting wood and stagnant water becomes clearer. On a patch of earth near a bend in the river, the footprints of many species overlap. A small print is pressed beneath a larger one. A claw mark slips down toward the water's edge. A long drag mark shows that something had been pulled through the mud. If someone were patient enough to read the ground, they would see an entire day of life written there, not in words, but in pressure, weight, and movement. Then darkness begins to settle. Not absolute darkness, but the blue-gray light of a land without lamps. The trees become soft black masses. The water holds one final streak of brightness. The sounds of daytime fade, giving way to other noises, small creatures moving in the brushwater, quietly touching the bank tree trunks, creaking a large herd, shifting slowly in search of a safer place to rest. And in that moment, the final world of the dinosaurs appears most clearly, not as a still painting, but as a breathing body. Every river is a vein. Every forest is a lung. Every herd of herbivorous dinosaurs is a great rhythm moving through the landscape. Every small mammal, every insect, every spore, every grain of pollen is part of that living web. In this place, T-Rex is not a legend. It is not yet a name. It is not yet a symbol printed in books, films, or museums. It is only a creature of this land, a gigantic resident of a world of rivers, humid forests, and coastal plains. It does not need to know that tens of millions of years later, human beings will dig up its bones, name it, debate it, draw it, fear it, and become fascinated by it. It only needs to keep walking. And when the night has grown deeper, far away among the dark tree trunks, a great shadow passes through the last patch of light beside the water. For only a few seconds, you can see the outline of a heavy head, a massive body, and a long tail stretching back to keep its balance. Then everything sinks back into the forest. There is no thunderous roar, no grand display, only the earth trembling slightly, then growing still again. That is how this kingdom introduces its king, not with a throne, but with the silence of every other creature as it passes by. Before Tyrannosaurus rex had taken shape in the human imagination, before it stood in museums with its massive skull-long teeth and tail stretching behind it like an ancient shadow, it was only fragments of bone lying still inside stone. No roar remained. No footprint was still soft in the mud. No gaze looked back at us from 68 million years ago. There was only earth rock time and the parts of a body that had turned into minerals resting silently beneath the dry lands of North America today. Imagine a morning on the land of Montana. Wind moves across bare hillsides. The ground is no longer the humid forest, no longer the ancient rivers bending across the plain as in the previous chapter. That living world has vanished long ago. The mudflats where dinosaurs once walked have hardened, been buried, compressed, lifted, eroded, and then exposed piece by piece beneath the modern sun. What was once a green, humid kingdom of the late Cretaceous has now become layers of stone walls, of earth cracks in the ground, and dark pieces of bone protruding like memories of a different planet. There, human beings did not find a complete king. They did not dig down and immediately see a whole T-Rex lying intact as if it had only fallen asleep. Science rarely begins with such a beautiful image. It often begins with something very small, a piece of bone, a tooth, a fossilized joint, a shape that does not look like ordinary stone. The searcher has to bend down, brush away the dust look for a long time, and ask, is this only rock, or is it part of a creature that once lived? It was from small moments like these that Tyrannosaurus rex began to return to the modern world. In 1902, the fossil hunter Barnum Brown, working for the American Museum of Natural History, discovered the first T-Rex skeleton in the Hell Creek Formation of Montana. That specimen was not complete, but it was important enough to later become the type specimen, the representative fossil for the naming of a new species. 6 years later, Brown discovered another more nearly complete skeleton at Big Dry Creek, Montana, including a very striking skull, and this skeleton would later become one of the museum's famous icons. Let us pause for a moment with that image. A person stands in a wide land beneath sun and wind, with nothing before him but stone and dust. He does not see the animal with his eyes. He only sees fragments of bone emerging from the earth. But in the mind of a scientist, those scattered pieces begin to connect. A section of leg bone suggests weight. A part of the jaw suggests the size of the head. A tooth suggests how it ate. A vertebra suggests the curve of the back, the neck, the tail. From a single fragment of bone, an entire creature begins to take form. That is the quiet beauty of paleontology. It does not resurrect the past through magic. It resurrects the past through patience. Each layer of stone is recorded. Each bone position is marked. Each broken piece is wrapped, transported, cleaned, compared, measured. A fossil is not merely an object for display. It is a witness. If read correctly, it can tell us where that creature lived, in what environment it died, how its body developed, and how the world around it once operated. But when T-Rex was brought out of the stone, it still did not yet have the name we know today. The name Tyrannosaurus rex was given in 1905 by the paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn. Tyrannosaurus is commonly understood to mean tyrant lizard, while rex in Latin means king. That name almost immediately created a powerful image, not merely a large dinosaur, but a ruler, a shadow standing at the peak of the predator world of the late Cretaceous. And yet, what is interesting is that T-Rex did not call itself king. There was no throne in the ancient forest, no dinosaur court, no crown placed upon its heavy skull. That title is how human beings looked back at a vanished creature standing before the size, shape, and overwhelming presence it left in the fossil record. The name king did not come from ancient myth, but from a working room, a scientific description, and the astonishment of the first people who tried to understand what they held in their hands. From there, T-Rex entered the imagination of humankind. But that path was never simple. The first skeletons never told the whole story. They were missing parts, broken in places, distorted by geological pressure, worn away by time. Scientists had to reconstruct from what remained while also admitting what was still unknown. A bone can say many things, but it also has limits. It does not preserve skin color. It does not record a sound. It does not show us exactly one day in the animal's life. It only opens narrow doors, and human beings must pass through those doors carefully. At first, the image of T-Rex in museums and illustrations was also different from the way we usually see it today. There was a time when it was mounted almost upright, with the tail dragging, or lowered the body, resembling a heavy two-legged monster. Later, as understanding of dinosaur biology changed, scientists gradually reconstructed T-Rex in a more balanced posture, the body leaning forward, the tail extending backward to maintain balance, the head and back forming a more natural line of movement. This is a very important point. Science does not simply find fossils and stop there. Science keeps looking again, correcting again, and making the image of the past more accurate. So, when you see a T-Rex skeleton in a museum, remember that it is not only an ancient creature, it is also the history of human understanding. In every joint that has been assembled, there are traces of misunderstandings, corrections, debates, and new discoveries. A skeleton standing still beneath the lights is actually telling two stories at the same time: the story of an animal that died tens of millions of years ago, and the story of human beings who spent more than a century learning how to see it more clearly. Imagine yourself walking into a great museum hall at the end of the day. Outside, the city is noisy, but inside, soft light falls upon a gigantic skeleton. The vertebrae stretch from neck to tail. The two hind legs stand like pillars. The ribs open like the frame of an ancient room. And at the front, the skull appears heavy and deep, with hollow eye sockets, gazing down at the modern world. There are no muscles left, no skin, no breath. But that silhouette is still enough to make human beings fall silent. That silence is not only fear, it is also the enormous distance of time. A T-Rex skeleton in a museum is like a bridge between two worlds that can never meet. On one side are modern humans walking across stone floors, holding phones, speaking softly to one another. On the other side is the ancient plain, warm mud, humid forest, the smell of dead plants, and herds of herbivorous dinosaurs moving beneath the sky of the late Cretaceous. Between them is bone. Bone is the only thing durable enough to cross that abyss. But fossils never come to us in an easy-to-understand state. A T-Rex tooth lying in stone does not say by itself, I belong to the upper left jaw. A vertebra does not say, I was once part of a young or an old individual. Scientists must compare it with other specimens, examine its structure, shape, size, geological position, and sedimentary context. They must ask very slow questions. In which rock layer was this specimen found? What species was it found with? Are there bite marks? Are there signs of disease? Was the bone washed away before burial? Or did the individual die close to where it was discovered? Each question like that pulls T-Rex a little farther out of the darkness, not to bring it back as a monster of imagination, but as a real creature, an individual with an age, with a size, one that may have been wounded, one that may have lived in a riverine landscape, died near a water's edge, been covered by mud, buried gradually replaced by minerals, and finally, after tens of millions of years, emerged before human eyes. There is also something deeply humble in that process. The more human beings learn about T-Rex, the more they realize that what they know is always smaller than what has been lost. Millions of individuals may have lived and died across millions of years, but only a very small number left fossils behind. Most vanished completely without leaving even a fragment of bone. They decomposed, were carried away by water, eaten by other animals, or lay in places where fossilization could never happen. So every T-Rex specimen that is found is not merely a discovery, but a rare gift of time. And because they are rare, each specimen carries special value. A nearly complete skeleton helps us understand posture and body proportions. A well-preserved skull helps us understand head shape and the position of the senses. A leg bone suggests how it bore weight. A younger specimen opens questions about the process of growth. Even a lone fallen tooth can show the presence of T-Rex in a particular area. No fragment is truly meaningless if it is placed correctly within the larger picture. But that picture is never completely still. It changes over time. New discoveries can weaken an old hypothesis. New technologies can read things that earlier generations could not see. Scanners, three-dimensional models, bone tissue analysis, biomechanical comparisons, studies of bite marks, sediment, research. All of these help the shadow of T-Rex become clearer. But the clearer it becomes, the less it looks like a simple monster, and the more it becomes a far more complex living creature. That is why this chapter is not only about finding bones, it is about how a king is remade from fragments. Not a king in the mythological sense, but a king in the scientific imagination, a creature large enough, special enough, dominant enough, that when human beings gave it a name, that name almost immediately carried the weight of an entire age. Picture a quiet laboratory at night. On the table lies a piece of bone half cleaned. Stone dust still clings inside the tiny grooves. A lamp shines down on its rough surface. Beside it are notebooks measuring tools, photographs, and stratigraphic maps. There is no loud drama here, only careful hands, steady breath, and the feeling that a creature that has slept for a very long time is slowly being heard. Perhaps people begin with a curve in the jawbone. From that curve, they understand the size of the skull. From the skull, they understand the position of the eyes, nose, and jaw muscles. From the neck bones, they understand how that heavy head was supported. From the hind legs, they imagine how weight passed down into the ground. From the tail, they see that the body did not stand upright like a tower, but balanced like a living bridge, stretching from head to tail. And little by little, the shadow of the king steps out of the stone. But no matter how far science advances, there are still empty spaces that must remain empty. We do not know the exact color of T-Rex's skin. We do not know exactly what sound it made in the night. We cannot confidently describe every hunt, every wound, every final day of a specific individual without direct evidence. What we can do is reconstruct carefully based on fossils' environment comparisons with living animals and biological principles. A good story about T-Rex does not need to invent magic. The truth itself is strange enough. Because think about it, a creature that once walked across mudflats 68 million years ago, that once lived in a world without human beings, now stands beneath museum lights, before children, scientists, passers-by who suddenly lift their heads. It has lost its skin, its muscles, its sounds, the smell of the humid forest around it. But it still preserves one thing, the ability to make human beings feel that they are standing before a very deep part of time. And from here, our story begins to change. In Chapter 1, we stepped into the final world of the dinosaurs, where rivers, humid forests, and ancient plains formed a kingdom of life. In Chapter 2, we have seen that this world does not come to us as a complete image, but through fossil bones, through fragments found in stone, through patient human beings bending down to the ground and listening to the past. T-Rex does not return through a roar. It returns through a tooth, through a vertebra, through a skull buried in stone, through the hands of people who believed that within the silence of the earth, there was still a story waiting to be told. And when those bones are assembled, when the name Tyrannosaurus Rex is placed upon that gigantic creature, a shadow begins to rise in the imagination of humankind. No longer an unnamed animal in an ancient forest. No longer only mineralized fragments lying deep in the ground. It becomes the symbol of an age, a final ruler of the dinosaur world. A king reborn not through flesh and blood, but through science, memory, and stone. Ahead of us, we will move closer into the body of that king. Not to turn it into myth, but to understand why evolution could create a creature that would make the world after it look upward in awe. But before we go there, let this image remain for a little longer. In a quiet great hall beneath soft lights, the skeleton of T-Rex stands still. Its hollow eye sockets gaze across time. Its teeth no longer bite its hind legs, no longer step its tail, no longer balances a living body. But around it, human beings still stop, still fall silent, still feel that something enormous has just passed through their minds. That is the first power of Tyrannosaurus Rex in the modern world. Not the bite, not the hunt, but the ability to make a pile of fossil bones become the shadow of a king. In the dim light of an evening, at the end of the Cretaceous, among humid forests and soft mudflats along the river, a figure moves very slowly. It has no need to hurry. Each step it places upon the ground carries the weight of an enormous body, a body not created in a single moment, but shaped across millions of years of selection, trial, failure, and survival. T-Rex was not an imagined monster made to frighten human beings. It was the result of evolution, bone, muscle, teeth, senses, and instinct converging into one of the largest predators ever to walk upon the land. At first glance, the first thing we notice is probably its size. An adult T-Rex could be more than 12 meters long, with a massive head, a heavy body, powerful hind legs, and a long tail stretching behind it for balance. But its true strength did not lie simply in being large. Many ancient creatures were enormous. Some herbivores were even heavier, longer, and more massive. What made T-Rex special was the way its body was arranged around one very clear purpose: to bring power into the bite, to bring the senses into the search, and to bring the entire body into the ability to claim the highest position in the ecosystem of the late Cretaceous. Let us begin with its posture. T-Rex did not stand upright like a classic monster in old illustrations, with its tail dragging along the ground. Today, the more reasonable scientific image shows it holding its body angled forward, its head reaching out in front, and its tail extending behind like a natural counterweight. That body was more like a living bridge than a vertical column. At the front was the heavy head, where the teeth, jaws, eyes, nose, and much of its power were concentrated. Behind it was the long tail, not an ornament, but the part that helped balance a large body moving on two legs. When it walked, the ground did not receive only a footprint. It received an entire evolutionary structure. The two hind legs of T-Rex had to be strong enough to support the whole body, stable enough to maintain balance, and flexible enough to move through forests, mud flats, riverbanks, low vegetation, and uneven ground. Modern biomechanical studies show that estimating the speed of T-Rex is very complicated, and different models can produce different results. A 2017 study suggested that fast running in very large adult individuals could place excessive stress on the bones, so the image of T-Rex charging like a speed machine in the movies must be treated with caution. This does not make T-Rex any less frightening. On the contrary, it makes the creature more real. A ruler does not always have to be the fastest. In nature, strength can come from many things: size, patience, perception, bite, force, position within the ecosystem, and the ability to make other creatures change their behavior when it appears. T-Rex may not have been the simple sprinting killer that cinema often presents. It may have been something even more formidable: a heavy but balanced body, powerful but not wasteful in movement, built to bring mass and pressure into the exact moment when they were needed. Then we come to the head. If the entire body of T-Rex was a living machine, then the skull was the center of power within that machine. The head was large, deep, and strong, carrying 2 rows of thick teeth and enormous areas for muscle attachment. This was not a long, slender snout designed to slice quickly through small pieces of flesh. This was a structure built to withstand force. A head evolved to hold press, pierce, tear, and crush. When we look at the skull of T-Rex in a museum, it is easy to see it as a dead shape, a dry frame of bone beneath the lights. But if we imagine the muscles that once covered it, the ligaments that once pulled tight, the blood that once flowed through living tissues, we begin to understand why that head was once something an entire landscape had to remain alert to. Biomechanical models have estimated that the sustained bite force of an adult T-Rex at a rear tooth could reach roughly 35,000 to 57,000 newtons, among the largest bite forces ever estimated for a land animal. That number should not be read as a dry detail. Imagine it as pressure concentrated into a single point transmitted through a large tooth, entering the bone-flesh skin and tissue of prey. It was not merely a bite meant to cause pain. It was pressure capable of changing the fate of a living creature in a matter of seconds. The teeth of T-Rex were not like delicate blades either. They were thick, strong, slightly curved, serrated along the edges, and built to endure far greater force than teeth specialized only for slicing meat. A tooth could fall out and be replaced, but in the life of the animal, each tooth was a tool of survival. When it sank into food, it did not only cut through soft tissue, it could create deep pressure, break hard structures, and leave marks that human beings would still be able to read on fossilized bones tens of millions of years later. But strength did not lie only in the teeth. A tooth without the jaw muscles behind it is only a sharp object. A skull without a strong enough neck cannot control a heavy head. T-Rex needed an entire support system: neck muscles, jaw muscles, skull bones, joints, ligaments, hind legs, and tail. Everything was connected. When the head lowered, when the jaw opened, when the bite closed, it was not the action of the mouth alone. The whole body was participating in a single moment. Its body was like a current of force carried from the ground through the legs, through the torso, through the neck, and into the jaws. And then there is one detail that always makes human beings both curious and amused: the small arms. The two forelimbs of T-Rex are famous because they were so short compared with its enormous body. Many people often see those arms as a funny detail, almost a strange weakness of the king of dinosaurs. But if we look at them only that way, we miss a very interesting evolutionary story behind them. The arms of T-Rex were small, but that does not mean they were meaningless. To this day, scientists still debate what T-Rex used those arms for. Perhaps they helped it balance in certain postures. Perhaps they assisted when the animal stood up, held something close to the body, or played some role in communication. It is also possible that over time, those arms became less important because the head and jaws had become the primary tools for hunting, biting, tearing, and seizing food. In other words, T-Rex was not a perfect body in the way human imagination might expect. It was a body created from many trade-offs. Evolution does not design creatures like a clean, elegant blueprint on paper. Evolution works with what already exists. Parts that remain useful are kept. Parts that become less necessary can gradually shrink, change, or lose the important role they once had. So, the small arms of T-Rex do not make it less fascinating. On the contrary, they make it more real. They show that the power of this creature had been driven very strongly toward the front, into the large head, the terrifying jaws, the sensitive sense of smell, the eyes watching prey, and the bite strong enough to make it one of the most formidable predators on land. But a powerful bite alone was still not enough to make T-Rex a ruler. A large predator needed to know how to find opportunity. It needed to sense where there was prey, where there was a carcass, where there was danger, and where it was worth approaching. Raw power needed to be guided by the senses. Imagine an evening in the ancient forest. Wind passes through low shrubs, carrying the smell of wet mud, stagnant water, rotting leaves, the skin of herbivorous dinosaurs, and perhaps even the faint scent of blood from a wounded animal somewhere along the riverbank. To human beings, all those smells might merge into one heavy, unpleasant atmosphere. But to T-Rex, they may have been like an invisible map. Scent told it what had just passed by. Scent told it where there was life, where there was death, where there was opportunity. In a world full of trees, mud-winding river bends, and darkness, the eyes could not always see everything. But scent could travel farther than light. Scent slipped through the forest, clung to the ground, drifted with the wind, and told T-Rex things the eyes had not yet seen. Scent did not only help it find carcasses, it could help recognize the presence of prey, the traces of other individuals' territory changes in the air after rain, or places where biological activity was strong. In a world with many trees, much mud, many river bends, and many obstacles, vision alone was not always enough. Scent passed through places where light could not reach. It hid in the wind, clung to the soil, gathered around water, and retold events that had happened before the animal arrived. The eyes of T-Rex were also an important part of that strength. Large eyes placed relatively forward may have given it good spatial vision and the ability to judge distance well. The American Museum of Natural History notes that T-Rex had wide, forward-facing eyes, something many scientists believe helped it with depth perception and effective long-distance vision. Imagine that enormous head standing still among the trees, barely moving, only watching. A small movement in the brush. A body straying from the herd. An animal lingering too long at the water's edge. The world before T-Rex was not only an image. It was distance movement, opportunity, and risk. Even hearing and balance should not be overlooked. When scientists study the brain region, inner ear, and skull of tyrannosaurs, they are not merely studying a dead head. They are trying to understand how that animal sensed sound, posture, and movement. A large creature needed to know where its own body was in space. It needed to turn its head, maintain balance, adjust its steps, respond to sound, and coordinate a heavy body in an uneven environment. Strength is not only the ability to destroy. Strength is also the ability to control one's own body. Perhaps that is what makes T-Rex truly impressive. It was not strong in only one direction. It was the combination of many advantages, a skull built to withstand force, an extremely powerful bite, thick teeth, muscular, neck, sharp sense of smell, eyes able to judge distance, hind legs supporting the entire body, a tail maintaining balance, and a body structure that pushed power toward the front. Each part alone is already striking, but when we place them together, we see a creature evolved to exist like pressure within the landscape. Picture it crossing a mudflat near dusk. A hind foot comes down, and the mud sinks deep around the toes. The tail keeps the body balanced as the head lowers slightly. The nose receives scent from the wind. The eyes look through the gaps between tree trunks. Nothing is hurried. There is no wasted motion. It does not need to prove its power with a roar. Its strength is already present in the way other creatures respond. The herbivores gather closer together. Birds fly out of the brush. Smaller animals disappear into rotting roots, and the ground itself seems to become more cautious. Even so, we should not see T-Rex as an invincible machine. Precisely because it was a real creature, it was also limited by a real body. A heavy body needs a great deal of energy. A large head needs a strong neck and balance. A terrifying bite still needs the right distance, the right moment, the right posture. A misstep on slippery mud, a wound to the leg, a wrong collision, an injured joint. All of these could become serious problems. In nature, strength always comes with risk. The larger the creature, the heavier the price of a mistake can sometimes be. This does not diminish the image of the king. It deepens it. T-Rex was not a mythological figure, exempt from all limits. It was a living creature in a real world where every advantage had to be used carefully. The powerful head helped it dominate, but it also required the body to balance in a particular way. Its fearsome teeth helped it process food, but teeth could also break wear down and fall out. Strong hind legs helped it move across wide territory, but legs could also ache, be injured, become infected, or turn into a weakness if an overly heavy body placed force in the wrong way. When we understand this, we begin to see that evolution does not create perfect monsters. Evolution creates creatures suitable enough to survive in their circumstances. And T-Rex, in the conditions of late Cretaceous North America, became one of the most powerful answers nature ever gave to the question if a large predator lives in a world of gigantic prey. What does it need to become? The answer is not the fastest in every sense, not the longest, not the one with the largest arms, but a body that concentrates its strength in the place that matters most: the head, the senses, the jaws, and the bite. In the darkness thickening beside the river, T-Rex stops. It does not roar. It only tilts its head very slightly, as if reading some signal in the wind. Beneath its feet, the soft mud preserves the marks of its claws. Above, the evening sky turns blue-gray. In the forest, small sounds slowly fade away. And in that moment, we can clearly feel why human beings, after tens of millions of years, still call it king. Not because it had a crown, not because it knew it ruled, but because evolution placed into that body a very primal kind of power, the power of a creature that made the entire land listen when it passed by. No king is born already standing upon a throne. Before Tyrannosaurus Rex became the shadow that could make an entire land fall silent, it too began life in a body far smaller than the one we imagine. Not as a gigantic creature more than 10 meters long with a heavy skull and a bone-crushing bite. Not as a ruler walking slowly across the mudflats, making herds of herbivores grow alert. It was once a fragile hatchling newly emerged from the darkness of an egg, still unfamiliar with the light moisture, the smell of mud, the sound of insects, the sound of water, and all the dangers of the final world of the late Cretaceous. Imagine a hidden place at the edge of an ancient forest. The ground is warm, covered with rotting leaves, soft earth, and fallen tree trunks. There, in a world where almost anything could become a danger, a very small creature begins to move. We do not yet have complete T-Rex eggs or hatchling fossils that allow us to describe every detail with certainty. So this scene should be understood as a careful reconstruction based on tyrannosaur relatives, growth models, and what paleontology can reasonably infer. But the essential point is clear. T-Rex did not begin life as a miniature copy of the adult. The young were likely more slender, lighter, more agile, with bodies still on the path toward becoming the giants that human beings would later call king. A newly hatched T-Rex would not have been able to face large creatures. It could not bring down a Triceratops. It could not step into a feeding ground like a ruler. It had to survive on much smaller opportunities: insects, small lizards, scraps of carcasses, eggs, other young creatures, or any source of food safe enough to approach. In its earliest stage, the world did not bow before it. On the contrary, it was the one that had to hide from the world. A crocodilian shadow beneath the water, a small predator in the brush, a sudden flood, a season when food became scarce. All of these could have ended its life before it ever had the chance to grow. This is what makes the life cycle of T-Rex so different from the iconic image we usually see. When we look at an adult skeleton in a museum, it is easy to forget that such power had to be built day by day, meal by meal, season by season, escape by escape. A hatchling has no title. It has only instinct, small legs, wide eyes, and a body learning how to read a world far too large for it. In the ancient forest, that young animal may have moved very differently from an adult T-Rex. It was lighter, with legs relatively longer, and a slimmer body. Its head had not yet become a gigantic weapon. Its teeth were not yet the heavy bone-crushing stakes of adulthood. In youth, its teeth may have been better suited for cutting and holding smaller prey rather than breaking large bones. Paleontologists at the American Museum of Natural History have described young T-Rex not as small adults, but as potentially slimmer, relatively faster, with arms longer in proportion to the body and a different diet from adult individuals. This opens a very fascinating image within the same species. Different age stages may have lived almost like different creatures. Young T-Rex did not need to compete directly with adult T-Rex for every meal. It could chase smaller prey, hide along the forest edge, and exploit gaps that adult individuals were too large to pursue. When it was young, its advantage was not weight. Its advantage may have been quickness, the ability to slip through spaces, the ability to learn and adapt. Follow a young T-Rex through a damp morning after rain. The ground is full of tracks from larger creatures. Puddles reflect the blue-gray sky. It steps over roots, stops when it hears a sound, then tilts its head toward the wind. The scent of herbivore herds still lingers in the mud. Farther away is the smell of an old carcass near the river's edge, but that place may also hold crocodilians, large turtles, or a stronger scavenger. The young T-Rex does not rush toward every opportunity. It must learn what every predator must learn, which opportunities are worth taking, and which ones might kill it. Perhaps it follows the edge of the forest, where speckled light falls over wet leaves. A lizard darts past. A small creature runs between rotting tree trunks. The young T-Rex lunges after it, not with the dignity of a king, but with the lively awkwardness of a growing body. It may slip in the mud. It may miss its bite. It may lose the prey in the brush. But each time it learns. In nature, youth is not only a stage of weakness. Youth is the school of instinct. Time passes in seasons. Rainy seasons make the rivers overflow, spreading mud across the lowlands. Dry seasons cause the water to retreat, gathering creatures around the remaining pools. For a young T-Rex, each season is a different test. When food is abundant, it grows faster. When food is scarce, the body must conserve. Dinosaur bones, like those of many other creatures, can preserve signs of yearly growth. Scientists study the microscopic structure of bone to estimate the age and growth rate of T-Rex, like reading traces of time buried deep inside fossil material. Studies of bone tissue show that T-Rex went through a powerful growth phase during adolescence, then slowed as it approached adult size. Imagine this not as a chart, but as a body changing year by year. The legs grow longer, the torso becomes heavier, the head grows deeper, the jaws become stronger. Prey that once seemed difficult begins to fall within reach. Pathways in the forest that once felt wide gradually become narrower. A fallen tree it could once step over easily now forces it to go around because the body has grown larger. The world does not change as quickly as it does, but the way it moves through the world changes constantly. In adolescence, T-Rex was probably a very special creature within the ecosystem. It was no longer a hatchling that could be easily swallowed, but it was not yet the giant standing above everything. It existed in the most dangerous middle ground, large enough to need more food, but not yet large enough to claim everything. It could hunt medium-sized prey, follow the scent of carcasses, compete with other species for food, and still have to avoid adult T-Rex. In a harsh world, members of the same species were not always a source of safety. A hungry adult could have been in a serious danger to a weaker young individual. For that reason, The youth of T-Rex should not be told as a straight path toward glory. It was a journey full of selection. Many individuals may never have lived long enough to become giants. An illness, an infected wound, a season of hunger, a flood, an encounter at the wrong moment, all could erase a future before it had time to form. When we look at an adult T-Rex, we are looking at a creature that passed through countless narrow gates of nature. It was not only strong, it was one that survived. Then came a stage when the body began to transform intensely. This was when T-Rex entered the path toward becoming the creature we recognize immediately. A larger head, a stronger neck, a heavier body, a more terrifying bite, a gait carrying greater weight. Adolescence passed, and the slender animal gradually became a mass of power. If, when young, it could chase light prey through the brush, then as an adult, its advantage no longer lay mainly in that flexibility. It began to step into another role, a creature capable of imposing its presence. This change may also have meant a change in food. A young T-Rex could target small or medium prey, while an adult could handle larger food sources, including the carcasses of gigantic herbivorous dinosaurs. This was not simply a matter of eating more. It was a shift in position within the ecological web. As the body grew, it did not only occupy more space, it occupied a different role in the world. Imagine an individual standing on the boundary between youth and adulthood. It stands by the riverbank as evening falls. Its shadow has become much longer than it was in the earliest years of life. The water reflects a head that is now deeper jaws that have grown heavier, a body beginning to carry the pressure of a larger animal. Yet in its movement, there is still something of youth experimentation, caution, a not quite complete certainty. It hears the sound of an Edmontosaurus herd in the distance. It smells mud churned underfoot. It knows there is food somewhere nearby, but it also knows that wherever there is food, there is often danger. Year after year, lessons accumulate within the body. It learns the routes of herbivore herds. It learns where water grows shallow in the dry season. It learns where carcasses often become trapped after floods. It learns the smell of sickness, the smell of injury, the smell of weakness in prey. It learns the safe distance from an adult Triceratops. It learns that one wrong lunge can injure a leg. It learns that deep mud can hold even the strong. It learns that sometimes waiting is better than attacking. And it learns that in that ancient world, it is not always the strongest creature that survives, but the creature that knows how to use strength at the right moment. When T-Rex finally reached adult size, it was no longer an animal of small margins. It became a major presence in the landscape. Its head had become the center of power. Its jaws could create terrifying pressure. Its body was large enough that many creatures had to avoid it. But even then, it still carried within itself traces of the hatchling it once had been. In its bones was the history of growth. In its behavior were the lessons of survival. In every step was the memory of seasons when it had hidden, gone hungry, and learned how to read the wind and the ground. That is how nature creates a giant, not through a single glorious moment, but through quiet accumulation. One day survived, then another day, one season overcome, then another season, layers of bone thickening, muscles growing stronger, teeth replaced again and again, experience clinging to instinct. Until at some point, the creature that once had to shelter in the shadow of the world becomes the shadow from which the world must retreat. But there is one very important thing. Adulthood does not mean absolute safety. A large T-Rex could still be injured. It still needed food. It could still fail in a hunt. It could still lose strength during a season of scarcity. It could still be fought off by a Triceratops harmed by a fall or scarred by bites from its own kind. Fossils of many T-Rex individuals show traces of injury and disease, reminding us that even the strongest creatures do not live outside the laws of pain and wear. Perhaps that is why the life cycle of T-Rex is so captivating. It is not only a story of growing power, it is the story of fragility, becoming authority, and then that authority still having to face its limits. From a tiny hatchling in the brush to a gigantic predator beside the river T. Rex passed through a journey that all living beings understand in their own way, being born, learning to exist, growing, changing, competing, aging, and finally returning to the earth. Look again at the hatchling from the beginning of this chapter. It is small light, almost invisible within the ancient forest. It does not know what it will become. It does not know that tens of millions of years later, human beings will name its species, mount its bones in museums, write books about it, make films about it, and call it one of the greatest predators that ever lived. It knows only that ahead there is the smell of food, behind there is a sound, beneath its feet there is warm mud, and above it stretches the sky of the late Cretaceous. Then time passes. That body grows. Those footsteps become heavier. That shadow grows longer. And one day, at the edge of an ancient river, when evening light falls across the water and the herbivore herd suddenly raises its head, the creature that once had to hide in the low brush stands there like a force of the land, no longer a fragile hatchling, not yet a legend in the imagination of human beings. Only an adult T-Rex, breathing slowly in the humid air, carrying within every bone the long story of survival. In a vast, ancient world where forests grew close to muddy rivers, where the ground preserved the footprints of creatures weighing many tons, no meal came easily. For Tyrannosaurus Rex, strength did not lie only in its massive head, its terrifying jaws, or its enormous body. Its true power lay in its ability to recognize opportunity. When to move closer, when to wait, when to attack, and when a carcass by the riverbank was worth more than a dangerous hunt. In the familiar imagination, T-Rex often appears as a predator, always charging forward, always chasing, always ending everything with a violent bite. But nature is rarely that simple. Large predators in the real world do not live by one kind of behavior alone. Lions can hunt, but they can also steal prey or feed on carrion. Bears can hunt, scavenge, dig, eat plants, eat fish, and eat carcasses. Crocodiles can ambush living prey, but they will not ignore a large body drifting with the current. In nature, survival is not honor. Survival is energy risk and opportunity. T-Rex was likely no different. It did not need to be only a predator or only a scavenger. If that question is asked too rigidly, it can lead us to misunderstand the true nature of wildlife. A gigantic creature needs a great deal of food. Every hunt comes with a cost, wasted energy, risk of injury, the chance of failure, the danger of losing another opportunity. If the carcass of a large herbivorous dinosaur lay beside the water, why would a powerful animal like T-Rex ignore it? But if a living prey animal had grown weak, become separated from the herd, been injured, or become trapped in the mud, why would it not take advantage? That is why the more reasonable view is to see T-Rex as an opportunist at the top of the food chain. It could hunt when conditions were favorable. It could feed on carcasses when it found them. It could steal food from smaller species. It could use its presence to force other creatures to retreat. Its power did not necessarily lie in always killing every prey animal with its own jaws. Its power lay in the fact that when it appeared, many other creatures had to reconsider their own chances of survival. Imagine a humid afternoon at the end of the Cretaceous. The river moves slowly, carrying rotting branches, mud, and the smell of the wetland. At a bend in the river, the carcass of a large herbivorous dinosaur lies tilted in the mud. Perhaps it died from disease. Perhaps it was wounded during migration. Perhaps it was swept away by floodwater, exhausted and collapsed. In the first few hours, that body belongs to no one. But its scent begins to spread. It travels with the wind, slips through low vegetation, clings to the surface of the water, and enters the trails where other creatures pass. The first arrivals may be small creatures, insects, lizards, opportunistic scavengers. Perhaps an ancient crocodilian lying nearby also recognizes the smell. Small bite marks appear first. The skin is opened. The smell grows heavier. Then from far away, a large shadow begins to move. T-Rex does not need to run, it only needs to arrive. As it comes closer, the smaller creatures withdraw, not because they understand the idea of a king, but because their bodies understand the difference in scale. A gigantic head lowers. The nose tests the scent. The jaws open. Teeth touch skin, flesh, and bone. In that moment, the jaws of T-Rex become tools for extracting an enormous source of energy. A large carcass can feed many creatures, but the strongest often takes the best parts first. But T-Rex did not leave marks only on dead bodies. There is evidence showing that it once attacked living prey. A 2013 study described a T-Rex tooth embedded in the tail vertebra of a hadrosaur with healed bone tissue surrounding it. This means the prey animal was bitten while alive, escaped, and then continued living for some time before dying from another cause. This is important evidence that T-Rex was at least sometimes an active predator, not merely a scavenger. Let us pause on that image. A hadrosaur, perhaps one of the duck-billed dinosaurs, runs across damp ground. Behind it is a T-Rex that may not yet be fully mature, but is large enough to deliver a terrifying attack. The bite does not end the prey's life immediately. A tooth breaks off inside the tailbone. The hadrosaur escapes. It survives. Bone begins to heal around the wound, and then tens of millions of years later, that healed injury becomes silent testimony that the attack happened while the prey was still alive. That kind of evidence is very rare. Most hunts in nature leave no clear trace for the fossil record. If a predator kills its prey and consumes the soft tissue, the bones may be destroyed, scattered, buried incorrectly, or never fossilized. If the prey escapes, the wound must be unusual enough, deep enough, and lucky enough to be preserved. So, a healed tooth mark is not merely a small detail. It is a moment of survival, frozen in stone. However, science also reminds us to be cautious. Not every tooth mark on bone can be taken as proof of a hunt. A bite mark on bone may have happened after the animal was already dead. It may be evidence of scavenging. It may be a bite made during competition over food. It may appear after a carcass was dragged, opened, or approached by many different species. The Florida Museum has emphasized that in many cases, tooth marks on bones are very difficult to distinguish with certainty between predation and scavenging, unless there is evidence, such as healed bone, around the wound. So, the real story is not that T-Rex is somehow diminished if it ate carrion. On the contrary, scavenging makes it more like a real large predator. A gigantic creature cannot waste energy for an idea of honor that only human beings invent. If the scent of a carcass leads it to a safer food source, then an attack that is a reasonable choice. If a living prey animal is weak lost or stuck in the mud, that is also a reasonable opportunity. T-Rex does not need to choose one identity. It only needs to live. Let us return to the ancient plain. A herd of herbivorous dinosaurs moves across the riverbank as the evening light begins to fall. They do not walk in perfect order like an army. Some move ahead. Some gather close together. Young ones press between larger bodies. Older individuals move more slowly, their necks slightly lowered, their steps heavier, their reactions slower than the others. In a world like this, a predator does not necessarily have to attack the strongest part of the herd. It watches the edges. It searches for slowness. It searches for distance. It searches for the moment when one individual is separated from the protection of the group. T-Rex may not need a long chase. A large body spends enormous energy when moving with force. What may be more reasonable is a slow approach using terrain trees, riverbanks, wind-dim light, and the carelessness of prey. In the humid forests of the late Cretaceous, visibility was not always open. Tree trunks, low shrubs, and bends in the river could create sudden distance. A large creature does not need to vanish completely to be dangerous. It only needs to get close enough before the prey reacts. Perhaps T-Rex stands still for a very long time. Its nose reads the wind. Its eyes follow movement. A weakened herbivore separates from the herd and moves toward the water's edge. The mud there is softer. Its feet sink slightly. A single moment like that can change the situation. T-Rex advances, not like a chaotic storm, but like a mass of strength released at the right time. The herd panics. Mud is churned up. Water splashes. A young animal runs the wrong way. An old one turns too slowly. In those brief seconds, the whole world narrows to the distance between the jaws and the body of the prey. But hunts do not always succeed. That is very important. Films often show us only the moment when a predator wins, but in nature, failure happens constantly. The prey may detect danger too early. The herd may flee in the right direction. The targeted individual may escape into dense vegetation. A bite may miss. A collision may leave T-Rex with an injured leg, a damaged jaw, or a lost advantage. For a large creature, an injury is never a small matter. An injured predator will find it harder to hunt. Harder hunting means greater hunger. Greater hunger means a greater tendency to take risks, and taking more risks can lead to further injury. That is why patience may have been an important part of T-Rex's power. It did not need to turn every movement into an attack. It could follow scent, follow footprints, follow herds, follow the places where water became shallow in the dry season, follow the areas where carcasses were often trapped after floods. A large predator knows that the world is always creating opportunities if it is sensitive enough to recognize them. Some days opportunity comes from life. Some days opportunity comes from death. A large carcass beside the river can become the center of an entire ecological scene. T-Rex is not the only one to arrive. Many other species come as well. Some bite into soft tissue. Some wait for scraps. Some drag away small bones. Some linger around the edge of the mudflat, daring to approach only after the larger animal has left. The death of one creature becomes food for many other forms of life. And in that cycle, T-Rex may play the role of the body opener, the bone breaker, the one that takes the parts many other species cannot reach. If we look at that scene with modern human eyes, it may seem violent and unpleasant. But in nature, it is not cruelty. It is how energy continues to move. The body of a large herbivore has accumulated plants, water minerals, and time. When it dies, all of that does not vanish. It returns to the soil, to insects, to scavengers, to predators, to mud and trees. T-Rex, no matter how frightening, is still only one part of that cycle. This is what makes this chapter deeper than the simple question, did T-Rex hunt or scavenge? The best answer is probably it did both, depending on the circumstances. And that is exactly what made it powerful. A creature that only hunts may go hungry when hunts fail. A creature that only scavenges may depend too heavily on luck. But a creature that can hunt, scavenge, seize food, and read opportunity in the landscape is far more flexible. Imagine T-Rex crossing a mudflat after rain. The old footprints have been softened by water. A strange smell arrives on the wind. It stops. The great head tilts slightly. There is no loud sound, no grand display. Only a gigantic body processing information through nose, eyes, memory, and instinct. That smell may be a carcass. It may also be wounded prey. It may also be a dangerous place where another T-Rex has arrived before. Each possibility leads to a different decision. In that world, the right decision could feed it for many more days. The wrong decision could leave it wounded, and perhaps across millions of years, the individuals that chose correctly tended to live longer. Those that were too reckless may have died early. Those that were too slow may have missed food. Those that knew how to combine strength with waiting, how to move forward and when to step back, could become the great shadows that the whole land had to notice. T-Rex did not rule by violence alone. It ruled by presence, by its ability to enter a meal and change the order around it, by its ability to make smaller species retreat from a carcass, by its ability to make herbivore herds grow alert when the wind shifted, by its ability to turn an entire region of rivers, mudflats, low forests, and trails into a map of opportunity. And here the image of the opportunist is no longer a dismissal. It becomes a title very close to the truth of nature. An opportunist is one that does not waste what the world gives it. An opportunist is one that understands food may come from a hunt, but may also come from a carcass after a flood. An opportunist is one that knows survival is not always beautiful, but it is always necessary. When night falls on the plain of the late Cretaceous, the river grows darker. Small creatures begin to move through the brush. Far away, a herd of herbivores rests for a while on higher ground. Beside the water, a large carcass has already been opened, and its smell still hangs thick in the air. T-Rex stands there for a while, its head lowered, its breathing slow, its gigantic body almost merging with the darkness. It is not only a hunter, nor only a scavenger. It is a creature living in a real world where every meal is part of a negotiation between energy and danger. And when it leaves the riverbank, leaving behind deep footprints in the mud, the smaller creatures begin to emerge again from the shadows of the trees. The ancient kingdom continues to move. Death feeds life. Life becomes food again. And somewhere in the darkness, T-Rex keeps walking, not knowing that human beings in the future will argue about it with words like predator or scavenger. It knows only one thing far simpler than that. In this world, the survivor is the one that knows how to seize opportunity before opportunity disappears. A king only truly becomes clear when we see his kingdom. If we place Tyrannosaurus rex alone in an empty space, we can easily turn it into a simple symbol, a massive head, a terrifying set of jaws, a gigantic black shadow moving through the mist. But T-Rex did not live in emptiness. It did not rule over a vacant stage. It lived among a crowded, complex community of creatures, full of sounds, full of smells, full of dangerous encounters and fragile distances between life and death. That kingdom in the fossil record is best known through the Hell Creek Formation. This is one of the most important archives of the final world of the late Cretaceous in North America, stretching across areas that are now Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. These layers of rock have preserved traces of an ecosystem from around 66 to 68 million years ago, where T-Rex, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, and many other creatures once lived together in a landscape of river plains, forests, swamps, and ancient coastlines. Imagine a morning in Hell Creek. The sun has not yet risen high. Mist still lies over the shallow waters. Dark, damp tree trunks stand along the riverbank, their roots gripping the soft ground. Beneath the layer of rotting leaves, insects move in tiny motions. In the murky pools, fish and turtles pass quietly. An ancient crocodilian lies near the muddy edge, almost motionless, showing only its eyes and the low ridge of its back above the surface of the water. This world does not wait for T-Rex to appear before it becomes dangerous. It is already dangerous in every bush, every bend of the river, every mud flat that seems calm. In the distance, a large and heavy figure steps out from the low vegetation. It may be Triceratops, one of the most remarkable residents of Hell Creek. With a solid body, 4 steady legs, a bird-like beak, 2 long horns above the eyes, a shorter horn on the nose, and a large bony frill behind the head. Triceratops is not weak prey in any story. It is a mass of herbivorous strength. It hunts no one, but that does not mean it is easy to bring down. An adult Triceratops standing firmly in open ground could be a dangerous challenge even for T-Rex. Do not imagine the meeting between T-Rex and Triceratops as a battle that is always loud and violent. In nature, most conflicts begin with observation and calculation. An adult T-Rex may see a Triceratops from far away. It may smell its skin, the mud clinging to its feet, the chewed plants around its feeding area. But moving closer is a risky decision. A well-aimed thrust, a horn-piercing soft tissue, a sudden turn of the body, all of these could injure the predator. In a world with no doctors, no medicine, and no place of absolute safety, a serious wound could be the beginning of death. Even so, the fossil record shows that these two species did not only live beside each other in human imagination. Tyrannosaur tooth marks have been found on Triceratops bones, and in some rare cases, healed traces on bone suggest that at least some interactions happened while the animal was still alive. The Florida Museum has emphasized that healed bite marks are very important because they help distinguish an attack on a living creature from feeding on a carcass after the animal had already died. Picture a very slow moment. An old Triceratops is feeding at the edge of the forest. It is no longer as fast as it was in youth. One horn may be worn, and its frill may carry scars from many years of impact. T-Rex stands in the shadow of the trees, not rushing out immediately. The wind changes direction. Triceratops raises its head. The The two creatures look at one another across a distance that is not very great. There is no dramatic music, no exaggerated spectacle, only a tense silence stretched between two massive bodies, each carrying its own weapons. On one side are jaws and pressure. On the other are horns, weight stubbornness, and the experience of a long life in that same land. And perhaps no attack happens at all. T-Rex may turn away. Triceratops may retreat deeper into the forest. In nature, avoiding a fight is sometimes the wisest victory. The battles human beings like to imagine are not always worth the cost to a living creature. For T-Rex, a large meal may be tempting, but an injury to the leg, the eye, the neck, or the abdomen could take away far more than that meal could give. If Triceratops is the image of resistance, then Edmontosaurus gives us a different kind of tension. This was a large, duck-billed, plant-eating dinosaur, often regarded as one of the important herbivores in the Hell Creek ecosystem. They did not have horns like Triceratops, nor heavy armor like Ankylosaurus, but they were not small. An adult Edmontosaurus could be a large, powerful creature, capable of moving in groups, relying on numbers, alertness, and speed to survive. Imagine a herd of Edmontosaurus moving across a riverbank near midday. They travel in loose clusters, feeding, while lifting their heads to watch their surroundings. Younger individuals stay closer to the center. Larger ones move along the edges. Their feet sink into the mud and pull free again, leaving deep tracks that quickly fill with water. As the entire herd moves, the soft ground seems to tremble faintly beneath their weight. They do not know they are prey in the story of human beings. They are simply living, eating, and searching for a safer place like every other creature in that world. For T-Rex, a herd of Edmontosaurus is not a simple meal. It is a problem to solve. Which one is weak? Which one is drifting away? Which one is wounded? Which one is still young? From which direction is the wind blowing? Where is the mud deeper? How far away is the forest? If it attacks, will the herd run toward the water or toward the trees? In a single moment, the predator must read an entire moving landscape. And sometimes just one animal falling behind is enough to turn the alertness of the whole herd into chaos. But Hell Creek contains more than these three great names. If we speak only of T-Rex, Triceratops, and Edmontosaurus, we still do not fully feel the crowded life of this kingdom. There is Ankylosaurus, lower, heavier, with an armored body and its famous tail club. A creature like that does not need to run fast. It survives by turning its body into a living fortress. With plates of armor across its back and a weapon at the end of its tail, Ankylosaurus reminds us that in the world of T-Rex, not every herbivore could only run away. There is Pachycephalosaurus, with its especially thick skull, often remembered for the image of its high-domed head. There is the Celosaurus, much smaller than the giant names, but still an important part of life on the ground. There are ancient ostrich-like animals, such as Ornithomimus, lighter, faster gliding across open ground, like slender shadows. There are smaller theropods, which may have hunted small prey, eaten eggs, fed on scraps of carcasses, or lived in the spaces that adult T-Rex did not directly occupy. Studies of Hell Creek show that this ecosystem contained a diverse animal community from large dinosaurs to turtles, fish, amphibians, lizards, ancient crocodilians, birds, and small mammals. Lower your view close to the ground. As the giant dinosaurs pass by beneath their feet is another world smaller, but no less important. Small mammals run among the roots. They may be active mostly at night, darting quickly through the layer of rotting leaves, searching for insects, seeds, eggs, or other small foods. They do not rule the sky or the land. They live in the gaps of the dinosaur world. But those small creatures, often unnoticed in grand images, are also a quiet part of the long evolutionary story that would follow. In the water, Hell Creek has its own life as well. Turtles crawl through the mud. Fish swim beneath the murky current. Ancient crocodilians wait at the river's edge, almost invisible. A young dinosaur coming to drink may not only fear T-Rex behind the forest, but also the thing lying motionless under the water before it. Swamps and rivers are not absolute shelters. They are dangerous borders, places where many species meet because all need water, and where opportunity often arrives together with risk. Plants, too, are residents of Hell Creek, even though they do not walk. Forests, shrubs, ferns, conifers, flowering plants, fallen leaves, and rotting trunks form the foundation of the entire ecosystem. Without them, there are no herbivore herds. Without herbivore herds, there are no large predators. Chewed leaves, broken branches, tree trunks falling into the river. All of these are part of the slow flow of energy that feeds this kingdom. Hell Creek is not only a place of dinosaur bones. It is a living landscape where geology, water plants, and animals weave together into a complete world. A day in Hell Creek may pass through countless encounters never recorded in fossils. A Triceratops crosses the path of Edmontosaurus. A small herd avoids the riverbank because of the smell of crocodilians. An ornithomimus suddenly runs across an open patch after hearing a branch snap. A small mammal waits until night before leaving its burrow. A young T-Rex follows the forest edge, keeping away from a larger adult individual. A fresh carcass appears after the flood season, drawing insects, small scavengers, and finally a great shadow with jaws capable of crushing bone. Here, T-Rex is not always the center of every moment, and that is exactly what makes it more real. There are times when it passes by and no one sees it. Times when it avoids prey that is too dangerous. Times when it arrives too late, when only bone and dried skin remain. Times when it startles an entire herbivore herd but catches nothing. Times when the mere scent of it in the wind is enough to make a small group change direction. Power in Hell Creek is not something that always explodes. More often, it is a quiet pressure. A Triceratops has the power of horns and mass. A herd of Edmontosaurus has the power of numbers and alertness. Ankylosaurus has the power of armor and a heavy tail. Crocodilians have the power of patience beneath the water. Small creatures have the power of secrecy. And T-Rex has the power of presence, the feeling that when it steps into the scene, every other species must adjust its behavior. Imagine late afternoon across a wide, muddy plain. The light slants through the mist. A herd of Edmontosaurus is leaving the riverbank. Farther away, two Triceratops stand among low shrubs, their heads lowered to feed, but their ears and eyes still alert to movement around them. In the shallow water, a turtle disappears beneath the mud. On the ground, old footprints overlap new ones, telling the story of a crowded day without needing words. Then at the edge of the forest, T-Rex appears, not with a roar, not with an immediate attack. It steps out only far enough for the light to touch its massive head and heavy back. The Edmontosaurus herd stops. A young animal shifts closer to the body of an adult. Triceratops raises its head. The air seems to slow. For a few seconds, the entire ecosystem appears like a stretched web of tension, each creature sensing the others, each small decision capable of changing the direction of the afternoon. T-Rex stands there, not as a monster separated from the world, but as part of that world. It was created by this very place, by the large prey that made its jaws become strong, by the dangerous opponents that forced it to be cautious, by the carcasses. After floods that taught it to take opportunities, by the forests and riverbanks that made its senses important, by millions of days of life and death that shaped the order of Hell Creek. And then, like many moments in nature, everything may end without any violent spectacle. T-Rex turns its head and walks along the muddy edge following another scent in the wind. The herbivore herd waits a little longer, then continues moving. Triceratops lowers its head, but more slowly than before. The small creatures gradually return to their own sounds. The river keeps flowing, carrying mud-rotting leaves and tiny fragments of ancient life. That is Hell Creek, not merely the background for T-Rex, but its true kingdom. A crowded, humid, dangerous place, beautiful in a way that feels very alien, where every creature carries its own strategy for survival. T-Rex is the largest shadow in our story, but it cannot be understood if separated from Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, small mammals, turtles, crocodilians, insects, trees, mud and water. A king is not defined only by his own strength. He is also defined by the world that must react when he passes through. And in the silent layers of Hell Creek stone, that world still leaves its traces, bones, teeth, fossilized leaves, turtle shells, bite marks, signs of disease, layers of mud, layers of sand, and tiny fragments, enough for us to imagine a lost kingdom. A kingdom where T-Rex once walked, not as a myth, but as a gigantic resident of a living community. There, Triceratops still stands firm in the evening light. Edmontosaurus still moves along the riverbank in herds. Ankylosaurus still carries a fortress upon its back. Small creatures still breathe in the shadow of tree roots. And T-Rex, the throneless king of Hell Creek, keeps walking across the mudflats, leaving behind deep footprints that time will eventually turn into the memory of stone. A morning at the end of the Cretaceous may have arrived very peacefully over the land of Hell Creek. Mist lay low across the mudflats. The river still flowed through the plain as it had flowed through countless seasons before. The trees still held tiny drops of water on their leaves. Insects still rubbed against the low grass. Turtles still crawled slowly near the water's edge. Ancient crocodilians still lay almost motionless beneath the murky river. And somewhere in the forest, an adult T-Rex still breathed slowly in the humid air, unaware that its world was entering its final hours. No creature there understood the sky in the way we understand it today. No Triceratops lifted its head and knew that ancient stones were moving through the darkness of space. No herd of Edmontosaurus could sense the orbit of a distant celestial body. No T-Rex, no matter how sharp its eyes, how sensitive its nose, or how powerful its jaws, could recognize what was rushing toward it from beyond every instinct it possessed. In their world, danger came from the forest, from mud, from water, from hunger, from wounds, from a great shadow appearing at the wrong moment. But this time, danger came from the sky. Around 66 million years ago, A large celestial object struck the region that is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, creating the Chicxulub impact crater. This event is linked to the KPG boundary, the point that marks the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs and many other groups of life on Earth. The Natural History Museum describes this impact as the event that abruptly ended the reign of the dinosaurs, which had lasted for around 180 million years, while the Lunar and Planetary Institute records that at least around 75% of the species on the planet disappeared in this extinction. But for the creatures of Hell Creek, none of it began with numbers. It began with light. Imagine a day that seems ordinary. T-Rex walks through low vegetation, leaving deep footprints in the soft mud. In the distance, a herd of herbivores is moving toward the water. The sun hangs in the sky, heat rising from the damp ground. Then somewhere far to the south, an unnatural brightness tears through the atmosphere. It is not like lightning, not like the sun, not like anything life on land had ever known. In that moment, an object from space touches the earth with an energy far beyond any storm, any wildfire, any thunder of the ancient world. The first impact was not a quiet story. Near the place of collision, rock, water vapor, dust, and heated material were hurled upward with terrifying force. Shock waves spread outward. The ground shook. The sea was violently disturbed. The atmosphere filled with material blasted up from the earth itself and from the celestial body that struck it. NASA notes that Chicxulub dates to the same time as the extinction boundary at the end of the Cretaceous, although the detailed mechanisms that caused the entire Earth system to collapse remain a complex scientific subject. At Hell Creek, far from the center of impact, the change may not have arrived in the way a film often imagines. We do not need to picture T-Rex immediately seeing a gigantic fireball above its head. More important is the chain of consequences that gradually moved across the planet. The sky changed, the air changed, the light changed. The things that had once nourished forests, herbivore herds, predators, and even the smallest creatures began to tremble at their foundations. In the first days after the impact, material thrown into the atmosphere may have darkened the sky. Dust, soot, and tiny particles spread widely, blocking part of the sunlight. Studies of the Chicxulub event often emphasize the role of dust and sulfates in causing rapid cooling and disrupting the global food chain. The Natural History Museum explains that material from the impact may have been driven into the atmosphere, reducing sunlight and preventing plants from photosynthesizing normally. To human beings, reduced photosynthesis is a scientific phrase. But in the world of T-Rex, it meant the forest began to weaken. Leaves no longer received enough light. Young plants died first. Low vegetation began to thin. Seeds, fruits, soft leaves, tender shoots, all gradually became scarcer. When plants weakened, herbivores went hungry. When herbivores went hungry, they moved farther, grew weaker, and died more often. And when the foundation of plant life collapsed, even the strongest predators were standing on a bridge, beginning to crack. At first, T-Rex may have benefited from death. A large opportunist would not ignore carcasses. After the disaster, animals that were wounded starving, separated from their herds, or killed by environmental change could become food. For a short time, the kingdom may have been heavy with the smell of death. Along riverbanks, in low muddy places, near burned forests, in stagnant pools, death may have appeared more often than before. T-Rex could move through that landscape, lowering its head to new sources of food, using its jaws and teeth to make use of what remained of a weakening world. But death cannot feed the king forever. if life does not continue to be born behind it. This is the tragic point of the story. T-Rex did not disappear because it suddenly became weak. It did not lose to a stronger predator. It was not pushed from its throne by another species in ordinary competition. It lived within an ecosystem, and when that system was broken from the root, individual strength was no longer enough. A bite could crush bone, but it could not bring light back to the sky. A sensitive sense of smell could find carcasses, but it could not make forests grow again at once. Strong legs could carry it far, but they could not find food if the entire land was running out of life. Imagine the months that followed, not as a scene of constant explosions, but as the slow impoverishment of a world. The sky became dimmer. Rain may have carried the strange taste of ash and chemicals. The air became colder than in previous seasons. Places that had once been dense with vegetation opened into gray gaps. Herbivore herds grew smaller. Young animals became harder to keep alive. Older animals exhausted sooner. Trails that had once been full of footprints became emptier. The river still flowed, but its two banks no longer held the same rhythm of life. A weakened Edmontosaurus might stand for a long time beside the water, no longer strong enough to keep up with the herd. A Triceratops might walk slowly through burned vegetation. Its heavy head lowered its beak, searching for whatever plant matter remained edible. A small mammal might survive in a burrow, thanks to its smaller size, more varied diet, and ability to hide. A turtle might endure better in water and mud. But the gigantic creatures which needed a great deal of food, a stable environment, and a rich network of plant life may have begun to face a problem with no solution. T-Rex still walked. Perhaps it still hunted when there was an opportunity. Perhaps it still scavenged. Perhaps it still made smaller creatures retreat. But its power increasingly resembled a shadow that no longer had a kingdom wide enough to cover. Each footstep was still heavy. Each bite was still strong. Each tooth was still a frightening tool. But the landscape around it had changed. A king of an ecosystem cannot survive if the ecosystem itself can no longer keep its old breath. Picture an afternoon after the disaster, when sunlight has become paler behind a high layer of dust. T-Rex stands beside a familiar river. This place was once full of the footprints of many species. Herds of herbivores once passed through. Ancient birds once rose from low trees. Insects once filled the warm air with dense sound. Now the sounds are thinner. Wind passes through bare trunks. The smell of mud remains, but within that smell there is something colder, older, less alive. It lowers its head to a trace on the ground. There is the scent of an animal that has passed by. But the scent is weak, far away, uncertain. It follows. One step, then another. Its tail balances behind it. Its eyes look toward the dark edge of the trees. It is still T-Rex, still one of the most fearsome bodies evolution ever created on land. But this time, it is not prey that is hiding from it. The whole world seems to be withdrawing from it. In great extinctions, what disappears is not only separate species. What disappears is the relationship between them. The relationship between plants and herbivores, between herbivores and predators, between carcasses and scavengers, between rivers and nesting grounds, between seasons and food, between light and leaves. When those invisible threads break all at once, life does not collapse like a simple wall. It cracks from everywhere. For that reason, the final day of T-Rex may not be one single moment we can point to. No one knows where the last individual died. No one knows whether it was old or young, male or female, healthy or already weakened. There is no skeleton bearing a sign that says this is the last T-Rex. Natural history rarely gives us endings as neat as stories. It leaves behind boundaries in stone layers of sediment chemical signs, the sudden disappearance of many groups of organisms, and a vast silence afterward. Perhaps the last T-Rex died beside a riverbank. Perhaps it fell in a thinned forest. Perhaps it was not a gigantic adult, but a young individual that never reached full power. Perhaps it lived for some time after the impact, moving through a world increasingly poor in food, following scents that grew rarer and rarer, crossing mudflats with fewer footprints than before. What we know is that its species, together with the other non-avian dinosaurs, did not pass beyond that boundary. And then after T-Rex, the silence did not last forever. This is the final thing that makes the story of Earth both sorrowful and wondrous. The impact ended an age, but it did not end life. Smaller, more flexible creatures, better at hiding, more varied in diet, or living in more sheltered environments, had the chance to continue. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, continued flying through a changed world. Small mammals which had once lived beneath the shadow of dinosaurs in bushes and dark burrows gradually stepped into new ecological spaces. Life did not return as it had been. It began to write another chapter, but the chapter of T-Rex had closed, not with a final battle against Triceratops, not with a failed hunt, not with a worthy enemy stepping out from the dark forest, but with the changing of the sky, the loss of light, the breaking of the food chain, and a silence slowly spreading across a kingdom that had once been so alive. Let us return one last time to Hell Creek. The river is still there, mud still settles, leaves still fall, though fewer than before. A dead tree collapses into the water. New layers of sediment begin to cover the bones of creatures that will never rise again. Through time, mud becomes stone. Bone becomes fossil. The traces of a world become silent lines written inside the earth. Tens of millions of years later, human beings will arrive. They will bend down among dry hillsides in a place that was once the humid plain of the Cretaceous. They will find teeth bones, bite marks, pollen ash layers, signs of the KPG boundary. They will reconstruct the silhouette of T-Rex in museums. They will debate how it hunted, how it grew, how it sensed the world, and how its world vanished. From those fragments of stone and bone, a story will return. And perhaps that is what makes T-Rex so haunting. It was not only the most powerful predator in its kingdom, it was also a king standing at the twilight of an entire age, a creature reaching the height of its strength just before the sky changed. A body evolved to dominate the land, yet vanished because of an event that came from a place no creature on the ground could fight against. When we look at the skeleton of T-Rex today, we are not looking only at strength. We are looking at the fragility of strength. We are seeing that even the greatest creatures belong to the world that feeds them. If that world changes too quickly, too deeply, too widely, then no jaw is sharp enough, no muscle strong enough, no instinct ancient enough to hold on to a throne. And in the gentle darkness of tonight's story, imagine one final time a T-Rex walking across a mudflat beneath its final sky. It does not know it is a legend. It does not know it is a symbol. It does not know that one day human beings will call it king. It only walks as it has walked through so many seasons before following the scent in the wind, following the memory of the earth, following the instinct of a creature that once belonged to a vast world. Above it, the sky has changed color. Beneath it, the ground still holds its footprints. Then rain falls, the mud closes over them, time passes, and the kingdom of T-Rex, once full of water, sounds leaf, sounds footsteps, and the breathing of gigantic creatures slowly sinks beneath the stone, waiting for a very distant day when it will be listened to again. And here our journey tonight beside Tyrannosaurus Rex slowly comes to an end. From silent layers of stone, we have traveled back into an ancient world, a world with no cities, no roads, no human voices, only wide rivers, humid forests, mudflats filled with footprints, and an ancient sky stretching above the final kingdom of the dinosaurs. We have seen T-Rex not only as a symbol of power, but as a creature that truly lived. It was not born a ruler. It was once a fragile hatchling in a world full of danger. It had to learn how to find food, avoid those stronger than itself, and grow through dry seasons, floods, and struggles in the shadow of the forest. Then, as an adult, it became one of the most fearsome predators ever to walk upon the land. Its jaws could crush bone. Its body had been shaped by millions of years of evolution. But even a king like that could not stand against what was coming from the sky. T-Rex did not vanish because it was weak. It vanished because its entire world had changed. If tonight's story made you feel peaceful, curious, or as if you had just passed through a very distant dream of the Earth, please subscribe to the channel or follow the fan page to continue joining us on the next journeys. And if you would like to hear more about an ancient creature, a lost civilization, a god from mythology, or some mystery of history, leave your suggestion below. Thank you for listening. Sleep well, and I will see you again in another story beneath a very distant sky.